delighted to be back in Poland. The last time was more than 18 years ago. I was a student on an interrail trip. It was after my first year at university. It was the first time I visited Berlin. I took the train from Berlin to Warsaw, and then I took the train down to Krakow. And in the 18 years, seeing how Poland has been, economically flourishing, and seeing how, in that sense, the country has been economically thriving is beautiful to see. And I'm very happy to have been back to Warsaw, which I consider a cleaner version of Berlin, and Krakow, which is still as beautiful as ever. I was very surprised, and I was always very worried that somebody would write a book before me. And I was always thinking to myself, why hasn't somebody written this book, and why is it up to me, as it were? I think it needed a foreign or a non-German journalist to cover this subject, because I think in Germany, if you're a journalist and you cover the subject, Germany in its core is still a very conservative and very hierarchical country. So to go after the most powerful business dynasties in your country, but also to an extent in Europe and in the world, they can turn the question around to German journalists and say, well, what did your father and grandfather do during the Third Reich, and who are you to question us? And that's something they wouldn't dare asking, of course, of a foreign journalist. Secondly, press law in Germany is quite restricted, and they wouldn't dare going after a foreign journalist with high-powered lawyers, because that would go against their PR strategy, which is to ignore the subject and to not give any attention to it, so they think it will go away by themselves. I think the two things that really surprised me was, first of all, I think I went into it naively. I thought maybe, oh, these families, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe they had some kind of remorse, or they had some kind of reflection on their actions. But I think what firstly shocked me was their depth of involvement, whether it was with the exploitation of millions in forced and slave labor from all over German occupied Europe, to be deported to be exploited to work into German factories and mines, the expropriation of Jewish-owned Jewish families, of Jewish business families, of Jewish-owned businesses, but also a practice, of course, that happened in German-occupied territories all across the board. And thirdly, their mass weapons production and kind of the zero reflection on the part of the patriarchs of doing all that was really something that shocked me. Secondly, it is a complete lack of reflection of their heirs today, their children, and to some extent their grandchildren, who have inherited the wealth and the fortunes, and who shepherd over some of the largest and best known companies and brands in the world, who don't show any kind of, instead of taking responsibility for history, they decide to cover up history and celebrate their fathers and grandfathers for their business successes, but leave out their war crimes and their Nazi affiliations. In the back of the book, there's all the responses of the families or of their family spokesman, and only one grandson of Friedrich Flick I corresponded with on the record. And, I think his response was very telling in how all these families relate to this past. He said, bad things have come out about my grandfather, who was convicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity at Nuremberg. Right? It was the one main character that has actually got convicted after the war. But he said, he was a genius who's given us so much more than wealth alone. So you can even see in his comments how difficult it is for them to distance themselves from their fathers and grandfathers, because they stand on they didn't create any of the business success themselves. So it creates this kind of identity crisis. If you distance yourself from it, if you disavow your father and grandfather, what is then left of your own identity if everything you do is built on what they've created?